Page 26, Born to Run. Sharing an intrinsic bond and an instinctive eagerness for the trail, mushers and their sled dogs are born to run. As the leading mushers of the 1991 Iditarod Trail sled dog race reached the checkpoint at White Mountain, 77 miles from the finish line in Nome, Alaska, an Arctic blizzard blew in like a freight train from Siberia. Wind chill temperatures dropped to 70 degrees below zero. Airplanes and snow machines hunkered down. People said it was the coldest Iditarod storm they could remember in a long time. 3 of the 5 leading mushers, Susan Butcher, Joe Runyon, and Tim Osmar, departed White Mountain but turned around in conditions so blinding with blowing snow they said they couldn't even see their dog teams, let alone the trail. But the other 2 leaders, Rick Swenson, followed by Martin Busser, pushed on through the raging storm and the night. Rick Swenson is either going to win this race or die trying, commented Tim Osmar. 26 hours later, at 1:30 in the morning, Swenson emerged victorious on Nome's Front Street, amid a festive crowd, to claim his 5th Iditarod championship. Yet the celebration was tempered with concern for Martin Busser, still in the storm. Was he okay? Was he lost? Was he alive? Swenson had trained near Nome under similar weather conditions. He and his dogs were used to storms like this. But Busser? 2 hours later he arrived in Nome. They say finishing second isn't memorable, but no one there will forget seeing Martin Busser as he approached thousands of cheering people, including race officials, journalists, and his wife, Catherine. He had survived the storm to emerge finally into the floodlights, his face reddened with frostbite, his eyes blue and gleaming. His team crossed the finish line and the crowd went crazy. Then the Swiss-born musher, who had named his 2 sons, Nikolai and Roan, after checkpoints on the Iditarod Trail, did a remarkable thing. Before hugging his wife, shaking the officials' hands, or waving to the crowd, he dropped to one knee and thanked his dogs, all of them, one at a time, by rubbing their frosty faces and speaking to them nose to nose in a language of faith and friendship only other long-distance mushers would understand. The following year, Martin Busser won the Iditarod in record time, covering the 1,158 miles from Anchorage to Nome in 10 days, 19 hours, and 17 minutes. The growing popularity of sled dog racing, especially the Iditarod, which is described every March across the nation and overseas on television and radio, in magazines and newspapers, has turned the spotlight on Alaska and the ethics, or perhaps absence of ethics, in the relationships between the mushers and their dogs. Many people today, almost all of them outside Alaska, react negatively to dog sledding, which disturbs the Iditarod Trail Committee. In 1991, David Wills of the Humane Society went to Alaska to observe his first Iditarod, and he returned in 1992 for a closer look. I think it is a rare individual who can drive his dogs more than 1,000 miles through some of the worst conditions that the country can offer and not cross the line into inhumanity, he said. But I will say, having observed the Iditarod with some education under my belt and some time spent with a lot of mushers, that it's possible. That does not mean the race itself can ever be humane. It means that there may be some individuals who can operate within the parameters of humanity, even in a race like the Iditarod. There are people out there who raise these dogs, love these dogs, and drive these dogs, and very humane people who do this with love and affection. Joe Reddington Sr., the 74-year-old father of the Iditarod, who started the race in 1973 and has mushed nearly 200,000 miles, has a kennel of 400 huskies and knows each of them by name. As he walks through his kennel wearing a wrinkled smile on his weathered face, his dogs howl with delight in hopes of his harnessing them up for a training run. Iditarod champion Susan Butcher, who apprenticed under Reddington in the 1970s, has 140 huskies in her Trailbreaker kennels. "I know every dog's parents," she told a filled auditorium in New York City 2 years ago, upon receiving the Professional Sportswoman of the Year award from the Women's Sports Foundation. "I know every dog's grandparents. I know which one has a cold and which one didn't eat well last night, and I know each one's personality and where he likes to be scratched. You have to understand, this is all I care about, and this is all I think about. I don't understand anything else, and I don't think about anything else. I'm with my dogs 12 or 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. They're my friends and my family and my livelihood." Travel a wilderness winter trail for 1,000 miles with a team of huskies, and you become very close. A bond forms. "I need you, you need me," is the credo between musher and dogs. Each husky has its own disposition, its own strengths and weaknesses that must be learned and respected. When Martin Busser crossed the finish line in Nome and kneeled before his dogs, he was thanking them for running a good race, certainly, but moreover for following his commands, pushing through the storm, and saving his life. Had he asked his dogs to do something they were incapable of doing? Obviously not. Had he asked them to do something that, given a choice, they would have avoided? The Iditarod becomes acceptable, says Wills, because it is based on the bond between owner and animal, and the willingness of the dog to work for the owner out of love, and the willingness of the owner to sacrifice the win and the fame for love of the dogs. That is the magic, and that's what's special. It's what draws people. The little Alaska Husky, widely regarded today as the best sled dog in the world, is descended from village dogs raised by Athabascans, the native people of interior Alaska. Pre-adapted to cold weather and fleet of foot, with tough paws, good appetite, stamina, and the willingness to run, what mushers call attitude, this dog is hard to beat. It is not a pure breed, and thus is not debilitated by traits common among pure breeds. It is a mutt, a marathon runner weighing only 35 to 55 pounds, 22 inches high at the shoulder, narrow-chested and long-legged, barking with excitement in the harness at the starting line, jumping 3 feet in the air with eagerness to run. It will hit the Iditarod Trail at 8 to 12 miles per hour, 10 to 12 hours a day for 10 to 14 days. Born to run is a description common among mushers referring to their dogs. But the obvious rebuttal is that mushers have bred their dogs to run, so the question of ethics spirals around to this: are the dogs happy? "I can't give you an easy answer," says David Wills, whose observations are valuable because he is not a musher, yet he has a trained eye. Aesthetically, interactively, and socially, to have dogs tied up is problematic. But I've got to give credit to Mary Shields, the first woman to complete the Iditarod. I spent a morning at Mary's place outside Fairbanks, and I've never seen happier huskies. Mary talked to me about how pets, not working dogs, but pets, pretty much adapt to what we give them. As long as we give them love and mental stimulation and affection, it really doesn't matter if they go into a 4x6 crate or if they go on the end of a chain. We share an intrinsic bond with animals, and mushers cultivate that bond. It is their passion. They love nothing more than to be out with an eager team of huskies, headed down a snowy trail with the northern lights dancing overhead. That is truly living, they say, and the dogs love it as much as they do. Vocabulary focus: intrinsic, emerge, temper, humane, parameter, harness, credo, disposition, stamina, debilitated, rebuttal.